name is Jack Carter. I'm 32 years old and live in a small town in Pennsylvania. I've been working the night shift at a local warehouse for about 5 years. It's not the most exciting job, but it pays the bills. I usually prefer the quiet nights. It gives me time to think. But one night changed everything. It was a Wednesday, and like every other shift, I arrived around 10 p.m. The warehouse was massive, mostly used to store construction materials. There were only a few employees working at night, and often I'd go hours without seeing anyone. That evening, I noticed a car parked across the street from the building. It wasn't unusual to see cars there, but this one caught my attention because it was an older model with its lights off, just sitting there. I thought maybe it was someone waiting for a friend or a nearby resident. I didn't think much of it and went inside to start my shift. The night was uneventful at first. I went about my routine, checking inventory and organizing pallets. Around 1 a.m., I went outside for a smoke break. The car was still there, but now it had moved closer, parked directly across from the main entrance. I couldn't see anyone inside, which made me feel uneasy. Trying to shake it off, I went back inside and continued my work. An hour later, as I was stacking boxes in the back, I heard something strange. It was faint, almost like a muffled cry. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The warehouse is old, and the creaks and groans of the building can play tricks on you. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. A muffled, desperate sound, like someone trying to scream through something. My chest tightened. It was coming from the supply room at the far end of the building. I grabbed a flashlight and headed in that direction, my steps hesitant. As I got closer, the sound grew louder. My heart was pounding. When I reached the door, I hesitated. Something about this felt wrong. I slowly opened the door, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A woman was tied to a chair, her hands and feet bound with duct tape. She had a gag in her mouth, and her eyes were wide with terror. She was shaking, her muffled cries growing louder when she saw me. I froze, my mind racing. Who was she? How did she get here? Before I could even think of helping her, I heard footsteps behind me. Panicking, I turned off my flashlight and slipped behind a stack of boxes just as the door swung open. 2 men walked in, their voices low and menacing. "She's not worth the trouble. We need to move her out of here before anyone notices," one of them said. "Relax," the other replied. "This place is dead at night. No one's here." I was trembling, trying to keep my breathing quiet. My phone was in my pocket, but I was scared they'd hear me if I moved. Slowly, I managed to slide it out and dial 911. Keeping the phone on silent, I whispered into it as quietly as I could, describing where I was and what was happening. The men continued talking, their conversation making my skin crawl. They were clearly part of something bigger, a trafficking ring, maybe. They mentioned other locations and hinted at more victims. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police. The men finally decided to leave the room, probably to check on something outside. As soon as they were gone, I stepped out of my hiding spot and approached the woman. "I'm going to get you out of here," I whispered, trying to keep her calm. Before I could start untying her, I heard the distant sound of sirens. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The men must have heard it too, because they came rushing back. I barely had time to hide again. They panicked, cursing and trying to figure out what to do. One of them pulled out a knife, and my stomach dropped. Seconds later, the warehouse was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. The police stormed in, shouting orders. The men tried to run, but didn't get far. They were tackled to the ground and handcuffed, while the woman was quickly freed and taken to safety. I gave my statement to the officers, who told me the men were part of a trafficking ring that had been operating in the area. They'd been using the warehouse as a temporary holding spot, thinking no one would notice. I couldn't believe how close I'd come to being caught in their twisted operation. The thought of what they planned to do with the woman, and potentially me if they'd found me, made me sick. I quit my job the next day. I couldn't step foot in that warehouse again, knowing what had happened there. Nights are no longer peaceful for me. Every shadow, every unfamiliar sound reminds me of that night. I'll never forget the terror in that woman's eyes, or how easily my ordinary routine could have turned into something far more horrifying. The world can be a dark place, and sometimes you don't realize how close you are to danger until it's staring you in the face. My name is Diana Carter, and I'm 27 years old. I live in a small town in Oregon, surrounded by mountains and forests. Hiking has always been my escape from the stress of daily life. I've been doing it for years, and while people warn me about hiking alone, I always thought I was careful enough to avoid any real danger. That belief shattered one afternoon in the most horrifying way. It was a Saturday in late autumn, and the air was crisp and cool. I decided to explore a trail I hadn't tried before. It wasn't a well-known one, but that was the appeal. I liked the solitude. I packed my essentials, water, snacks, a flashlight, and set off around 10 a.m. The trail was beautiful, surrounded by towering trees and the sound of leaves crunching under my boots. About an hour in, I came across a small clearing with a makeshift campsite. A man was sitting by a tent, fiddling with something in his hands. At first, I didn't think much of it. Hikers and campers often cross paths, but when he saw me, he stood up quickly and smiled in a way that didn't feel friendly. His eyes lingered on me a little too long, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Hey there," he said, stepping closer. "Beautiful day for a hike, huh?" I nodded politely, keeping my distance. "Yeah, it is." "You hiking alone?" he asked, his tone casual but his gaze unsettling. I lied, trying to sound confident. "No, my friends are a bit behind me. They're slow hikers." His expression didn't change, but I noticed his hands fidgeting with a piece of rope. "Where are you headed?" "Just up to the ridge and back," I replied, even though my plan was to take a loop trail that would lead me far from there. "Nice," he said, but his voice had a strange edge to it. "Be safe out there." I muttered a quick "you too" and walked away, my heart pounding. I resisted the urge to look back, but I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me. As I continued, the unease grew stronger. The forest, which usually felt like a peaceful escape, now felt oppressive. The quiet wasn't comforting, it was deafening. About 2 hours later, as I navigated a muddy section of the trail, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Footprints, fresh ones. They weren't mine. I stopped and stared at them, my breath catching. They were larger, clearly made by someone wearing boots, and they were following the same path I had taken. I told myself it could be a coincidence. Maybe another hiker had decided to use this trail, but deep down, I knew better. Trying to stay calm, I picked up my pace, scanning the woods around me. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of fear through me. About half a mile later, I spotted something that confirmed my worst fear. A shadow moved through the trees behind me. It was him. Panic surged through me. I veered off the trail, plunging into the dense underbrush. The branches scratched my arms and face, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I found a spot behind a cluster of bushes and crouched down, trying to steady my breathing. My heart was racing so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Then, I saw him. He was walking along the trail, holding a rope in one hand and a knife in the other. My body froze. I held my breath, barely daring to blink as he scanned the area, his eyes sharp and predatory. He muttered something under his breath, but I couldn't make out the words. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he moved on. I waited, counting to 100 in my head before daring to move. When I felt sure he was gone, I pulled out my phone and called the ranger station. My voice was shaking as I told them what had happened and gave them my location as best as I could. They told me to stay put and remain hidden until they arrived. I huddled in the bushes, every sound making me flinch. When the rangers finally found me, I burst into tears. They escorted me back to safety and told me something that made my blood run cold. The man was a wanted criminal, suspected of multiple assaults in the area. He had been using remote trails to target lone hikers. I couldn't believe how close I had come to being one of his victims. The rangers assured me I had done the right thing by lying about my plans and calling for help. After that day, I never went hiking alone again. The forest, once my sanctuary, now feels like a place full of hidden dangers. I still hear his footsteps in my nightmares, still see the glint of the knife in his hand, and I'll never forget the look in his eyes, a chilling reminder of how quickly something innocent can turn into a fight for survival. My name is Nina Grant, and I'm 31 years old. A few months ago, I was driving cross-country for a job interview in Chicago. Exhausted after hours on the road, I pulled into a small budget motel off the highway. It wasn't the kind of place I'd normally stay, but I was too tired to keep driving. The man behind the desk greeted me with a strange smile. He was older, with greasy hair and thick glasses. Something about him felt off, but I ignored it. "I need a room for the night," I said. He nodded and handed me a key. "Room 12, he said. When I asked for a room closer to the lobby, his smile vanished. "That one's the best we got," he snapped. Too tired to argue, I took the key. The hallway was dimly lit, and the carpet smelled musty. When I got to room 12, the door looked battered, like it had been kicked in before. Inside, the room was barely clean, with peeling wallpaper and a faint mildew smell. I double-checked the locks on the door and windows before collapsing on the bed. I planned to leave early in the morning. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, but as I listened, I realized it was coming from the wall. The tapping was steady, deliberate, like someone's finger against the divider. I tried to dismiss it as pipes or noise from the next room, but then I heard a creak outside my door. My heart raced. I got out of bed and tiptoed to the peephole. What I saw made me freeze. A man stood outside my door, holding a knife. He was tall, wearing a dirty hoodie, and his face was obscured by shadows. He didn't move, just stared at the door. Backing away, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator. "Stay quiet and lock yourself in the bathroom," she instructed. "Officers are on their way." I locked myself in the bathroom, sitting on the cold tile floor with my phone clutched tightly. My breathing was shaky, and my heart pounded as I tried to stay silent. Minutes felt like hours until I finally heard sirens outside. Then came shouting and a loud bang as my door was forced open. The police entered, and I ran out of the bathroom, trembling. They searched the room and found something chilling. A hidden door in the closet connecting my room to the one next door. Inside the adjacent room, they found the man with the knife, crouched in a corner, muttering to himself. When questioned, the motel clerk admitted he knew the man. He had been staying there for weeks, targeting solo travelers. The police took my statement, and I quickly packed my things, leaving the motel behind. Even now, I can't stay in a hotel without checking every corner, every closet, and every door. I constantly think about how close I came to being his victim. The thought of that hidden passage still haunts me. It's terrifying how easily someone can invade your space, turning a safe haven into a trap. Sometimes the memories creep in at the worst times. When I'm alone at night or staying in unfamiliar places, I often wonder how many others weren't as lucky as I was. The idea lingers, unsettling and grim. Hotels are supposed to be temporary homes for travelers, but this one became something far darker. This experience left me shaken in ways I can't fully describe. It's not just the man, the knife, or the hidden passage. It's the realization of how quickly everything could have gone wrong. That sense of vulnerability, of having no control, is what stays with me the most. I'll never forget the sight of the hidden door in that closet, or the eerie way the motel clerk acted like it wasn't a big deal. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if he had done more than just ignore the danger. Did he help the man? Did he let him in? That motel still exists, tucked away on some forgotten stretch of highway. I don't know why it hasn't been shut down. I try not to think about it, but the truth is, I'll never forget it.